All right, simplify3D, the slicer to end all slicers. Now, I know it's a bit, you might be a bit reluctant to pick it up because it has a pretty sizable price tag, as opposed to the free slicers, but a slicer is tenfold more important than the actual printer. There's a reason why it costs $150. It's like the algorithms in just printing simple objects, let alone complex objects, are so much better than the free slicers. And I'm going to go over just a few of those settings right now. All right, so when you first get your printer and you throw something in Simplify3D, you're going to want to throw in something pretty complicated just because you want to do it. But try and hold off on that and pick something super simple. This is a calibration scene that I set up. It's basically just 5 cubes and it tells me if my bed is level. This takes about 20-30 minutes to print, so not that long, but I can tell right off the bat where I'm going to have problems when I do a bigger print that maybe spans out over the entire bed. So super easy to set up in Maya, and very easy to print it off and make sure that you're going to have a good print for more complicated objects. All right, getting into processes or just the interface. Up in the left part, you have your different objects. You can see how when I click them, they become highlighted. And Simplify3D works regularly, just drag and drop. So, a file from the desktop, just drag it right in, or you can do import. Has this nice center and arrange button. I space them out this way manually, just by clicking them and dragging them. You can hit W and move stuff around. Or you can space stuff out in Maya and import them that way. If you set these up in Maya as one object, Simplify3D has this very nice separated connected surfaces, and that'll split them out into different objects here so you can rearrange them in Simplify3D. All right, so going into processes, probably Simplify3D's most powerful ability, which is really quite impressive. So basically, the first layer of the print is the most important thing when you're actually printing. If the first layer messes up, your entire print is going to mess up. Too much filament is going to come out, it's going to drag, it's going to knock over things. It's just going to mess up if you don't have a good first layer. So because of that, I designed a process just for my first layer. Then I have another process that takes care of second layer and onward to the end. So layer 1, and by the way, to create a new process, you would just click to add. So I'm going to go into layer 1 here just by selecting and doing edit process settings. Then you can select type of material, the processor right or left, to include a raft, support, infill percentage, tons of settings. Some of the most important settings, which will be automatically set, probably when you get Simplify3D, it'll ask you what type of printer you have. But these are general settings like nozzle diameter, extrusion multiplier, things like that I'd leave alone. Down here, retraction, ooze control, very cool stuff. So retraction is basically when the printer is going to go from this cube to this cube, it's going to travel. Now, when it does this, a little bit of filament is going to sip out of the nozzle like that, and it's going to cause it to drag or possibly extrude a little bit too much. So retraction, what that does is it actually reverses the motor and pulls the filament in the nozzle and then squirts it back out down at the end. I also have a vertical lift here, so it would actually lower the platform there, which is pretty cool. And you can see it right here in this actually printing. When it goes around, you can see it moving the bed up and down with vibrating slightly, and that's so that it doesn't drag across the gaps. Okay, so other stuff, wiping the nozzle, coasting at the end. You can highlight over all this stuff and I'll tell you what it does, but it's basically just kind of like cleaning off the nozzle, just like other little things that are designed in the algorithm that just make it work better. You know, and the free ones, the free software is free slicers. They don't have these things, and these anybody could code this stuff. It's just something that like makes it work a little bit better. That's, you know, like all slicers basically create the printing path. It's just this one has, you know, tells it to print it a little bit differently, which just works out. So moving on, layer, my layer height right here. I have some settings here that are here. Let's see. Let's go back to the original settings. Oops. No, I do not. Let's try these guys. All right. So these settings, basically your first layer height, I'm going to go and put this down to 90. What that means is it's going to, if you think about the density of a square when it's printing, the first layer right there, it's going to pack, like let's just say a unit of 1 into that layer. So if the layer is 90% tall, it's going to pack a density of 1 into a space that's 90% the size. So it's going to squish the filament down, which is going to cause it to stick a little bit better. It's also printing 45% the total speed, so it's going to print slower, which is going to cause that first layer to stick a little bit better, which is going to be a nicer overall, you know, first layer. Over here on the left, top solid layers, that's top on the very top of the shell right there. Bottom solid layers, that's on the bottom. Outer perimeter shells, that's on the outside perimeter. Those settings work pretty well for me. This outline direction, inside out, another really cool thing Simplify does. Basically on the outline, it's going to print the inside before it prints the outside outline. So if you have stuff like an angle and you have an overhang, if you have an overhang, it's going to print the inside before it prints the outside, which won't have that much weight. Like, let's say, so you're printing an overhang, like going up diagonally that way. It's not going to have that overweight. It's not going to have that extra weight on the edge, which would cause it to droop down. So you're going to get a nicer overall print when you're printing kind of crazy overhangs, like more than 45-degree angles. All right, additions. Skirt and brim, kind of useful, kind of gets in the way. It basically just primes the nozzle and draws an outline around your object. So like, I'm going to reset my view so we can talk about stuff a little bit easier. So it draws an outline around. Not really that important. I found that it's getting in the way. Raft, don't really need it if you have a first good layer. All right, infill, pretty important. Everybody's talking about doing 50% infill, 75% infill. I need strength. Don't worry about it. All you need is 10% infill, especially when you're prototyping. You don't want to waste a lot of filament when you're printing, because the print might not work out really well. I'd only say use like high percentage filament if you're actually going to use the part for something that is going to need to be stress tested. There are these guys that actually printed boat motors, propellers. They printed like motorboat propellers out of carbon fiber, wood, polycarbonate, ABS, from a 3D printer, and they actually used them on the boat, and he rode around the lake in it, and I don't even think he had 100% infill. It was like 75% infill, but it's crazy. So you can, you know, kind of use these settings. Infill angle offset, that's something that's kind of like that's basically in the supports. It's going to alternate the angles. Sorry, not in the supports, in the infill, like inside the object, it's going to alternate every layer the way it kind of like does the infill. So it's going to make it a little bit more structurally sound. Fast honeycomb is just the design on the infill. I like that one just for structural strength. Your support, you can just leave that, you know, pretty much these settings when you need it. Simplify3D is pretty smart about generating support. Temperature, that's all going to be according to your printer. Cooling, I don't have any cooling on the first layer, so my first layer sticks. Then I turn on the fan after the second layer. You can make all these rules for, you know, certain layers, which is just awesome. Like if you know you need to dial in that far, Simplify3D can do it. G code, this is going to be custom to your printer. I'm pretty sure that You know, like these things will be filled in once you select your printer profile at the beginning when you get Simplify 3D. Scripts, I have it play Funky Town. When it finishes, you can tell it to your printer to play different sounds based on the little beeper. Kind of cool. Printing exporter format, you know, you can export MakerBot, then send a replicator, whatever you want to do. I just have binary for mine, which works really well. You can do all your custom scripts. I don't even know what coding language this is, but wow, custom scripts, amazing. All right, so then the main settings, which I don't know why they're in other. Your default printing speed is 60. That I have that for my first layer. That works really well, and 45% of that is even smaller. It's like what, 20 millimeters per second, super small or super slow. Then on my second layer, I bumped that up to 90. But you know, all these settings you can kind of dial in and really like stress test your printer and see how far you can really push it. XYZ movement speed. This is the speed that moves when it's not printing. This is how fast my bed moves up and down. You know, really cool settings that you can dial in. You can even dial in the price so to figure out how much a print will cost you. You know, if you know how much you pay per spool or per kilogram. Pretty crazy stuff. Lastly, advanced. This is where you can basically like tell it for per layers. You can tell it where to stop and start printing at different layer heights. The way you figure out the layer millimeter height is you go up here and you go view cross section, and you can see the cross section right there. So you can kind of figure out how high a model is, and I'll go over that more in just a second. All right. Lastly, in the options, you know, you can control retraction again. One of the coolest things over here, slicing behavior, non-manifold segments. I have it healing them. This is if, you know, I have any bad geometry like T-splines, T-intersections. You know, you have three edges like kind of welded together. The normals would flip out. Merge all outlines into a single solid model. This kind of works sometimes, but you know, if you have a lot of models meshed together and you have that outline problem on the meg text, that might fix it. But you know, you just have a ton of settings that you can really dial in, and usually when you hover over these things, they tell you what it does. See, this will limit the extruder wipe movements to outermost extruder out only. That sounds good. So, you know, I mean, a lot of these things I just checked on and did basic prints like this so I could figure out what they did. But feel free to copy these settings. And yeah, those are the gist of the settings. Lastly, I'd say when you get everything how you like it, you say prepare to print, select all the layers, and then you can actually see how it's printing. There's the nozzle going. Then, you know, you can save it to toolpaths. It tells you up at the top 24 minutes, and you can see the speed. I'll go over this screen one more time and supports in just the next video.